Last week at my info session about ancestral healing for Chinese and Taiwanese lineage, someone asked a really great question, which was essentially, what is the difference between healing generational trauma and ancestral healing? And it's something I've thought about before, but this is the great thing about questions. Sometimes it's not until somebody asks you that you really take the time to decipher what your answer is. So the answer I gave this person was based on everything I've learned, my own interpretations and understandings. And after the session, I went to my little AI helper tool, which is ChatGPT. Side note, I do have concerns with ChatGPT. I don't use it for certain topics, and I only use it for certain topics. I think for a topic like this, it's okay to use. I think it's helpful. So, the way I usually present ancestral healing is that it's more of a spiritual take on what you might call healing generational trauma in a more clinical sense or in therapy, for example. And it's more spiritual because it's not just about the mental health part of it and the more evidence based part of it, which is a lot more clinical and scientific and more of a therapy model. But it goes beyond that because you're working not only with the 3D part of it, which is everything I just named, and also body based stuff, but also going beyond that to start tapping into your intuition and using things like meditation and even channeling to communicate with your ancestors and receive information. So it gets more spiritual, not as clear cut with a therapeutic model or a trauma based model. And also, ancestral healing is not just about healing trauma. That is part of it, but there's this whole other part that's also about connecting with the gifts and the blessings of your ancestral lineage. It's not just about healing from something bad that happened. It's about also recognizing and accepting and connecting with and receiving the positive parts of your lineage as well. So it really encompasses both the light and the shadow, which I think of as more of a holistic, full picture representation of your connection with your lineage. And one thing I always include in my presentations is both receiving the blessings and releasing what is not yours. Releasing what isn't yours can be a lot of different things. It could be trauma responses that you're carrying that was literally passed down through the generations. There is actual DNA evidence that shows that trauma makes changes in the DNA that can be passed down through the generations. So that's something that you could be carrying that isn't yours. There could be responsibilities, burdens, qualities, ways of being, ways of thinking that have just been passed down to you that you operate from, that you function with, and maybe they've caused negative effects in your life or in your relationships or how you move through the world. And maybe they were useful at one time for a certain generation, but they keep getting passed down, and maybe they're not the best thing for you in the present, or they're not serving you in the present in how you move through the world today. So things like that, as they come up and get uncovered through ancestral healing, you can start to let them go. And again, there's the light side of it too, where you start being more able to receive the gifts. And one thing I don't talk about a lot until we get into our sessions is that there's this whole other aspect of past lives too. So when we get there, and it's always dependent on the person, how much that resonates with them. But once we get there, then we're really going super duper spiritual. And I believe there's a lot of ancestral healing that comes through connecting with past lives as well. Because then you're working on healing not just this lineage of this lifetime, but possibly other lifetimes too. So that's getting super duper spiritual. If you want to read more about that, you can look at my website, livingyourdharma.co. I have a little section about past lives in the Ancestral Healing page. But for now, I'm just going to talk about this lifetime. And yeah, that's kind of the distinction that I would make. So I would say ancestral healing to me is a really broad kind of umbrella, if you will, and healing generational trauma is part of that. It's more of the mental health side of things. And then there's like all these other areas that get into the more spiritual side of things. And that's what I would include under ancestral healing. Now, ChatGPT basically confirmed what I was thinking and what I already said, but I really love the way that they further defined it. So if you've ever used ChatGPT, they do a lot of times give really long explanations, which I find really helpful a lot of times. But I kind of gathered together some of the main points that bring it all together really concisely. And it's honestly really helped me just in these past few days, because I just looked this up a few days ago and it's really stayed with me. So I really love the way they put it. So it's similar to what I said, and then I'll add to it. Generational trauma is a psychological concept. It's talking about healing symptoms and patterns inherited or passed down. So if we want to put it really simply and concisely, you're literally healing trauma. So again, symptoms and patterns that have been passed down. And I would add to it that these are from bad things that happen. You know, trauma is not a good thing. They're bad things. We don't want traumatic things to happen, but almost inevitably it happens to nearly all of us, you know, and it's not that you can't make wonderful things happen out of the trauma that you've experienced or endured. I would say most of the light work that a lot of people are doing in the world probably came from a place of trauma at some point. Maybe not everyone, but you know, that's where a lot of beautiful light work comes from, is transmuting trauma. So definitely, it's very important to me, healing generational trauma. I've worked on it in therapy as well. And then you start to transmute it and you start to make different decisions or make positive work out of it. But that comes a little bit later. The healing part is, once again, healing symptoms and patterns that have been inherited or passed down. And then ancestral healing, it calls a spiritual or integrative concept, basically what I said. Healing your relationship to the lineage itself, not just the wounds, but also stories, gifts, strengths, identity, connection. So basically just another way of packaging up what I've described already. Again, the light, the gifts, the blessings, not just the wounds. I love how it talks about stories, identity. I always say the strengths as well. So really along similar lines. And this is the part that really stayed with me. It's going to be the very last line. So again, generational trauma. We're talking about repairing injuries. And I love this one. Ancestral healing is about restoring your relationship to your lineage. That just really stayed with me. I love that so much because I think about how this came up in my info session last week when I went to live in Taiwan for 4 months, like over 15 years ago. I wanted to live in Taiwan so I could connect with my heritage and improve my Mandarin. So even at that time, I was doing a form of ancestral healing work that I didn't name it as that, but that's what I was doing. You know, I was restoring my connection with my ancestors, with my lineage. And it wasn't about healing trauma. There was no trauma that I had to heal, but it was more of a disconnection that happened because my parents were immigrants. I was born in the US. I, obviously grew up with Chinese and Taiwanese culture, but I was also very disconnected from it. Mandarin was my first language growing up, but by the time I reached adolescence and then adulthood, I was speaking at like a very low level. And I just wanted to go back to Taiwan to restore that part of my connection to my ancestry and my culture. So that's just an example. Once again, I'll just say it again. Healing generational trauma is about healing the wounds, repairing the injuries, and ancestral healing is about restoring the relationship. So I hope that helps to anyone who may have had the same question, which I'm assuming is going to be a lot of people. And starting next week, Tuesday, December 2nd, I'm beginning a 2-month group container for this exact topic, ancestral healing for people of Chinese and Taiwanese lineage, and or. So it could be either or both, partial or full. It's going to be 2 months. So it's going to take place from the beginning of December to the end of January. There's going to be a 2-week break around the end of December, and then we're going to pick it up again after the new year. It's 7 sessions total. It's really affordable. So if you're interested, I would love to have you be a part of it. The registration link is in my bio. If you have any other questions, I would love to answer them. Shoot me a DM or go ahead and register, and you can add your question at the end of your form, and I'll get back to you after I see your response. Thank you so much, y'all.